it, believe it, receive it. I am living the freaking dream right now. Welcome to the latest episode of The Game Last Night. I am your host, Olivia Christian, and I'm going nuts because this episode features me in conversation and later at the batting cages with the one and only Dave Stewart. His resume of accomplishments is super long. I'll just give you a couple bullet points here. 3-time World Series champion with the Dodgers, the A's, and the Blue Jays. He was a World Series MVP in 1989, a Roberto Clemente Award winner. He's currently an analyst with NBC Sports Bay Area doing pre and post for the Oakland A's. I escaped the rain in San Francisco and flew down to San Diego, where Dave, my buddy Dave, he's resided for the past 20 years or so. We went to a hot spot of his called Barbusa and were treated to an amazing meal and some beautiful wine. Now, Jackie Robinson Day 2017 is coming upon us, so Dave and I talked about legacy, we talked about where the MLB is doing well, where it can improve, and growing up in the 60s in Oakland, California. Let's jump in.
So there are so many things that I want to talk to you about, and I fangirled you on the phone yesterday, so I'm going to try to reel it in. Thinking about my dad and brother going, oh my gosh, did you really just say that, Dave Stewart? I want to start with, you're an Oakland native. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about your first sports memory. You played a lot of sports when you were young, but what's the first thing that you remember either doing or seeing on TV that made you want to participate?
My first sports memory was, I'm giving away my age now, we were in the early 60s with my father. My dad, he worked for Pacific Maritime, he was a longshoreman. And I thought that we were taking a ride across the bridge for him to just go and bid for jobs. He was at what he called the hall. And I thought he was just going there to bid for jobs. But when he went in, he actually picked up a couple of baseball tickets. And so when he grabbed the tickets, we had game tickets for the Saturday. And it turned out that Saturday was, back in the day they had bat day. And it was a Giants game because there were no A's. And they were playing the Pittsburgh Pirates. And so I had a chance to see, although I watched baseball as a youngster, I got a chance to see what I considered to be my heroes. Willie Mays, Willie McCovey, Jim Ray Hart, Juan Marichal pitched that day. Back then they had the Alou brothers, Matty Jesus and Felipe Alou. Yeah. So I got a chance to watch them. They played the Pirates. And back in that time, the only player from the Pirates that I could remember was Roberto Clemente. And the Giants ended up winning a close baseball game that day, and that was one of my first baseball memories.
At that game, were you thinking that could be me one day, or was just you remember it as your first live experience at a baseball game?
I actually told my father that I wanted to be a baseball player, and he told me, he said, boy, you can't make any money hitting a ball with a stick. And
you're like, challenge accepted.
Yeah, that's what basically that's what it came down. He said, why don't you be a doctor or a lawyer or something like that? But baseball is tough to get into. Jackie Robinson hadn't been, you figured 62, I think Jackie Robinson was 48. And so there hadn't been that much time, 14 years. Willie Mays, McCovey, Hart, Ray Hart, I think were the only black players on the Giants team at that time. And so, my father was very, very traditional and felt that the game of baseball was still a sport that was very, very difficult for blacks to play. And so he wanted me to concentrate my efforts on things that were a little bit easier to get into.
Well, what was Oakland living like? There's in high school, you can go left, you can go right. You're doing well in sports. You've got your boys, and you went in this direction. Haven't been drafted. You had these opportunities, but what were you up against?
Well, wow. I grew up on Havens Court Boulevard, between Bancroft and East 14th. So as you go deeper in the blocks, the worse it got. Whereas if you go towards Seminary, the worse it got. And so, anything below East 14th was real trouble.
It's bad, it's worse, it's really worse. Okay.
Yeah, it's like any place. You know where you belong and where you don't belong. My sister worked for the Oakland Boys and Girls Clubs. And so there was a boys club on 87th and East 14th called the Aussie and Car Club, which is where I was. pretty much every day. I worked for a man named Everett Henry at the gas station. So I had a job, the boys club, practicing football, baseball, basketball, trying to be a good student, and family values. Though my father was not around, he gave me great values that my mother continued. We had things as a family that we had to do, that were required of us. And one of them was being the best individuals that we could possibly be and staying away from the things that would put us behind bars.
I want to go back to what you described when you said your boys, you'd go out, play in the street, play baseball in the street. Do you think that's something that kids, especially African American kids, aren't doing anymore when it comes to playing baseball and finding a love for it early on? And is that maybe lending to the fact that we don't have a lot of African American kids playing baseball? We've got Black Latinos all over the league, but there's been some hiccup with recruiting African American players over the last, 20 years or so?
I think a lot of things are missing. In my experience, my today experiences, the black kids that are playing baseball, they're being encouraged by their parents. I mean, they are rooting these kids on and they're promoting the sport of baseball to play the sport. And I think that's where it starts first. Then the second part of it, obviously, is playing it at parks and recreations and making sure that the programs are good programs, but at least having the programs to offer to the kids. And then people have asked, what is Major League Baseball doing? And I think that Major League Baseball is doing a great job. I participated in a series called the Dream Series in Arizona. And the Dream Series promoted 50 kids, predominantly inner city black kids. And this series was pitchers and catchers. I was shocked.
So were you doing both? Were you catching and pitching? Because you...
I was on the pitching side. I was shocked at how many black pitchers there were and black catchers.
How old were these kids?
They were starting age 14, the oldest at age 17.
Okay, so they're playing in high school.
Yes.
Nice. So was it a balance of getting out there and playing and then kind of talking about what it means to be a baseball player, what kind of habits they need to be forming now, getting them to the next level, collegiate?
It was instruction on the field, but after we left the field, it was instruction, life instruction away from the field, where we had guest speakers come and talk about the college life. They talked about the educational part of it. So they got instruction on the field, baseball, off the field, life. It was very, very well done.
Well, that's awesome.
But once again, I think Major League Baseball is investing. They're putting academies across the country and they're open to these kids at no cost to come in and get instruction. I think that Major League Baseball is doing a good job when it comes to that. I think that they are looking after our kids. And now it's just up to them to run with it and take the opportunity and run with the opportunity. I'm sorry, we're not all going to be basketball players. And I know when you look on a basketball court, the majority of the players that you see, they look like you and me.
Right.
And when you look at a football field, the majority of the players that you see, they look like you and me.
Well, that's what I think that baseball's up against.
Yeah.
There's so many, there's shoe deals, you get your State Farm commercial, there are players that you could see that look like you.
You're right.
In baseball right now, it's like, I don't really
You're right.
identify, so it's easier to go the other sport route.
You are very, very right. But, I mean, in my opinion, the sport that discriminates the least, is baseball. There's no height restriction, no weight restriction. All you have to be able to do is see the ball, hit the ball, or in my particular case, take the ball in your hand and throw it to a particular area and work at your trade. Become good at the sport. Play the sport like you know how.
I think it's the hardest sport. You know,
In my opinion, it is, but I wouldn't tell Michael Jordan that, or
Michael Jordan might know, actually.
I certainly wouldn't say that to Cornelius Bennett, from the Buffalo Bills. But I believe that if you've had an opportunity to play basketball, and maybe I'm just saying it because I did play basketball and I was good at it, I believe I can get on the basketball court and play the sport. And I believe I can get on the football field and play the sport if I dedicate myself to being stronger and bigger.
Yeah.
I believe I can play that sport, but I think that the toughest thing in the world is to see a baseball at 90 miles, even 90 miles an hour. I'm going to take it down a little bit, at 90 miles an hour and hit it. It's the toughest thing to do. I think the toughest thing to do is to take a baseball and get a square area of about 2 or 3 inches and throw it and hit a spot. I think that those things are difficult to do.
Talk to me about transitioning out of being a professional athlete. There are challenges, you're no longer in the spotlight as you were if you were standing on the mound in the World Series. Transitioning everything you've learned into a new life. You can go the coaching direction, the analyst direction, or Vegas, whatever it is. What was your thought process and how you came to what you eventually did?
I've always thought, even as a player, that I didn't want to manage, that I wanted to manage or coach. I thought that I wanted to be in a position to make decisions. And I wanted to make big decisions. I wanted to be in a position to have impact on an organization and to build an organization. And I felt that way as a player. I spent more time, as a player, obviously you're on the bench, and for 16 years I was on the bench and watching, and I played for some great managers. Tommy Lasorda was the first influence and impact that I would have had as a manager. And then after that, the next guy would have been Tony La Russa. And then the next guy after that was Cito Gaston, and they were great managers, and I thought, and I felt that I learned a lot from them, watching them manage game and manage people. But I always just felt that there was more, and that I was capable of doing more, and I was capable of being more in the game, and so I wanted to get into management.
So what, the Selig Rule came in like the 70s or so, sometime around there? Kind of like the Rooney Rule in the NFL. They wanted to make sure that front offices diversified, but they didn't have. The Rooney Rule was more like you have to interview people.
He probably put it in the 70s, but I don't think that it really kicked in. The Selig Rule didn't really kick in until the 90s, where there was a consequence if you didn't interview.
Yeah, that's the thing. It didn't start out. It was kind of like, hey, don't forget the African American dudes.
There was a consequence if you didn't interview minorities, starting, in my opinion, in the 90s.
Have you seen? We don't have large numbers of African American GMs now. You've talked about that in the past.
We have one, and that would be Michael Hill, who's held his position with the Miami Marlins for a pretty good period of time. The difficulty is we never have the opportunity to sit in the room with the people that make those decisions, and not just sit in the room with them for a minute, but I was told by a close friend of mine, if I have an opportunity to pick somebody to work with, I'm more likely to pick somebody that I know over years versus a 3-hour interview.
Right. But I think that's the ongoing challenge, right? Like, when do you get to the point where you're in the room, you can have those conversations, especially with teams in baseball that are transferred from family to family to family to family. You worked for my dad 50 years ago, and I work now. I know that your son, we grew up together, and
you keep it in the family.
Yeah.
Kind of, so to speak.
That's the hurdle.
But the unfortunate thing that we just don't have those opportunities. We're not in those situations where we have developed and honed relationships for over 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 years, 10 years, and an owner has the opportunity to say, well, shoot, I met Dave Stewart 10 years ago, and Dave Stewart's a good man, and I know who he is, and I know his background, I know his family, and I know where he comes from.
Yeah.
We don't have very many situations like that inside this industry. And so most of these jobs in a 3-hour interview or a 6-hour interview, sometimes they're 2-day interviews. Ultimately, if you do have a minority in the room or someone that looks like you or me, and why I say minorities, because there are some very capable non-Afro-American candidates.
Yeah.
Kim Ng is a perfect example. I think she would make a great general manager. But how do we get past the phobia? 1, that she's a woman.
Yeah.
2, she never played the sport. How do we get past that? And this woman has been dedicated to the sport forever. She's worked for the Yankees, the White Sox, the Dodgers. And she's in the commissioner's office now. She is more than capable of doing the job. And so I don't know how we get past that. What I do know is that, the sport is pretty much set in its patterns and how they do things.
They're so set in their ways.
They
If I
are.
hear, even down to the organ playing, do-do-do-do-do, and Deo, I'm like, we can't pick a new song by now?
So the commissioner has his work cut out. What I can say is for Bud Selig, for Rob Manfred, I do know that there are initiatives that are in place to try to make change, but I think that the old theory and the old situation still stands. He who has the goal makes the rules.
Are you trying to get a GM job? Is that something that you still?
No, I wouldn't pursue it. I would not pursue a job in the form that I worked for the Arizona Diamondbacks, where I had 3 bosses. I think that the situation that Mike Hazen is in and under right now for the Arizona Diamondbacks is the perfect situation where he answers to him and he has conversations with the president, but his decisions are his decisions, which is the way it should be. And in a lot of these jobs, it's not designed that way. But I would still much rather work for one person than 3.
Jackie Robinson Day is coming up. And it's been some decades since he and some other players first got into the league. When you think about what he did and what others did at that time to integrate the league and the legacy they left behind, what do you think about your legacy and how you stack up, or the part you play in the timeline of great African American players throughout history in baseball?
I really don't know. I lived my life like I did when I played. I'm just kind of playing it. I'm in the game, and I wake up today, and when I wake up, my thought is, what can I do today to be a better individual, a better human being? When I played, I didn't have time to look at the numbers or the 21 seasons or MVPs or any of that stuff. I didn't have time to do it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to play the game right, and I wanted to respect the game. The one thing that I wanted to do, and it might be the only egotistical thing that I can say, is that when I finished playing, I wanted people to say my name long after I was done playing. That's what I wanted. And if I did that, for me, it meant that I did everything that the game of baseball required from me and asked of me.
Good stuff. Well, with that, I finished my glass of wine, and I finished Dave's glass of wine, and we headed to Brickyard, where my competitive spirit kicked in, and that sweet-sounding Dave guy went out the window, talking mad trash about my big head and doubting my abilities.
I'm gonna give him like an extra large. Is that one good?
It's pretty snug.
It's not gonna say.
Oh, so you give this guy a couple glasses of wine, and you tell him what he really thinks about it.
You think she's a little nervous? Look big. Breathe, 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 breathe. How about that swing? How about that? How about that swing? You asked for a bucket.
Yeah, I whiffed at the first couple of pitches, but as you can tell, I started to step up my game. Huge thanks to Dave for spending so much time with us. It was amazing. Thanks for everyone watching this episode. Please subscribe to the show and share it with everyone you've ever met in your entire life. And follow us on social media wherever possible. Until next time, y'all, stay woke.